Welcome to Open Door Cleveland. Our guest is the renowned anthropologist and historian Runoko Rashidi, who has a major focus on what he calls the global African presence, that is, Africans outside of Africa before and after enslavement. He is the author of over 20 books, and I'm not going to describe the most recent ones because I know he published one within the past a half year, and he's probably working on some others. He's traveled to and visited over 120 countries, and as a lecturer and presenter, he has spoken in 65 countries, and I'm figuring that figure has probably gone up because you spoke to us in Sudan, and I don't know if you had been there before. But anyway, welcome to Open Door Cleveland, my brother.
Well, thank you, brother. It's good to be with you.
Yes, and how are things for you out there on the other side of the country?
Well, the weather is very pleasant. You know, it's in the 70s. It's a nice little breeze. But the pandemic is still raging. You know, I've been sheltered in place for over 5 months now, trying to be safe and taking the opportunity to dissect and share my travel experiences, the photographs from the museums, the physical travels, and what have you. And now with Zoom, you know, we have another form of technology for me that's new, and another way to disseminate this information the best I can.
Okay. So you have a presentation coming up on the 28th and the 29th of August. It's called Black Women in History and Art. It's going to run from 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time and 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the 29th. Tell us what this presentation is about besides the obvious as reflected in the title.
Well, we're splitting it into, first of all this Zoom stuff is new for me, okay? But I decided to split it in two because we are able to reach an audience not just in the United States, but in Europe and Africa and other parts of the world. So we're going to have a two-part presentation. The first part on Friday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the next part the following morning. I think the time is 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it will look at Black women, obviously, in history. There'll be all original photographs. I'm going to limit it to 150 photographs, my very best original pictures that will show African women, not just in the ancient world. We're going to start, for the most part, with the Nile Valley. But I also want to be able to show images, particularly of African women freedom fighters in the Americas during slavery days. So as a Black man, I think it's very, very important that we lend our voice, that we show respect and even veneration to our sisters, our mothers, our daughters, our wives. But also as a historian, it's clear to me that African women have played a role in history and culture, civilization that far overshadows women in any other culture and society. For example, when I was organizing these photographs, and I'll probably change one or two, maybe add some, I was, you know me, I try to take a global approach, and I could not find, now in Kemet, the Nile Valley, and Nubia, where we just left, you have the names of people like Amani Shiketo, we've all heard of Hatshepsut, Amos Nefertari, Queen Tai, etc. All these women who lived in the ancient Nile Valley. But I couldn't find the name of a single woman, Black or otherwise, especially a Black woman, in the entire history of Asia. In fact, in Asia, I can't find the name of a woman in antiquity, nor can I find it in the Americas among the Aztec, the Inca, the Maya, and scarcely in Europe. And I found that very, very interesting. We can go down the roll call of great Black women in Africa, but in other parts of the world, we just don't see it. We rarely even see women in the mythologies, or what might be called the cosmogonies, or the worldview, the gods and goddesses. And I just found that astounding. And I never really thought about it so much until I began to do this most recent research. So it'll be a visual presentation. It's going to be excellent. And it'll be a Black man, a Black historian's tribute to great Black women in history and art. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you would choose to deal with women on that level. And as we think about it, we're in a period of time where we're kind of seeing a resurgence of the significance of women in politics and economics. We've seen the importance of women in science. We have several sisters that are on the leading edge of medicine. And we have been connected that way for a long time. But, you point out something very interesting in that you're not seeing a whole lot of history when it comes to women.
Not at all.
Yeah, that's just profound to me. But one other thing I want to point out, and that is the story behind the picture. After having witnessed several of your lectures over the past couple of years, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. But then when you get to the story behind the picture, you have so many layers of information and knowledge that can be uncovered. So can you give us a glimpse of who some of these historical figures might be that you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, well, I've already listed several. Anytime I do a presentation, a historical presentation, I almost always start with the mothers of humanity. So, for example, we would be able to see the skeletal remains of people like Dinknesh, or Dinknesh is the maybe the most famous, I guess you could say, of African people in the most ancient world, the most famous image of the African in what might be called prehistory, for lack of a better word. And if you go to the National Museum in Addis Ababa, you see a copy of her bones on display. Dinknesh, or Lucy, is 3.2 million years old. And then if we go to the Americas, you can see something similar to that. There's a skull in Brazil called Lucia, named after Lucy, which is not the name the Africans gave those bones, by the way. And it's in the Natural History Museum in Rio de Janeiro. And interestingly enough, that skull survived the massive fire that burnt that museum down. Lucia is important to us because she's the oldest identifiable person in the Americas. And so this is important because it tells us or reinforces what a lot of us already know, that the history of Africans, even in the Americas, doesn't start with enslavement. And then, of course, we spend a lot of time in the Nile Valley. For example, if you go to the first dynasty of the first royal family, you have the insignia of a woman named Mernite. And Mernite appears to be the first female monarch in history. We could, in fact, call her a female king. And then that same tradition we can find in the 17th royal family. And this family is important to us because this is a liberation time. Africa had been invaded by the people called the Hyksos, and you have women who are very active in the liberation struggle, putting the first foreign invaders of Africa out. And then, of course, you find the great women of Dynasty 18, starting with people like Amos Nefertari, and then Queen Tai. Okay, so we have that. So I'm going to look at all of that, and we'll continue to trace women in the Nile Valley, and we'll go down to the Nubian or Kushite period, where you have sisters like Amenirdas and Shepet-Wepet II, who were the de facto rulers of the core of Egypt, Upper Egypt, and then the Kandakas of ancient Meroe, some of whom defeated Roman armies. And then I'm going to look at people like, of course, Yasanchiwa. And these are original pictures now. Yasanchiwa, the warrior queen of the Ejisu clan of the Asante nation. And then we'll end up taking it to the Americas and looking at people, like there's a whole series of them that most of us have never heard of. We've heard, I think, of Nanny in Jamaica, the Jamaican Maroons. But there are sisters like Solitude, for example, a sister who's known as Solitude, who was raped aboard the slave ship and fought with the freedom fighters of Guadeloupe at the same time the Haitian Revolution is going on, and who became pregnant and was captured and executed either the day after or the day the baby was born. We're trying to find out what happened to that child. Or you have people like, there's a sister in Suriname named Alida. Alida is the mother of the series of African freedom fighters in Suriname, the most spectacular of which is a brother named Boney. and the Dutch called the followers of Boni negers. They were the most implacable freedom fighters in the history of Suriname. So we want to give a global overview, and we're going to go from ancient to modern, and it'll be all original photographs from the museums, the tombs, the statues, and what have you. And I'm actually very excited about it.
Okay. We've been dealing with a system of patriarchy probably for the past 2,000 or so years. What would you give credit to for the exclusion of women from history, as you stated?
Well, Africans have traditionally had a matrifocal social structure. I would say where the emphasis is on the female. It's been capsulized in this statement. I think it could be Jomo Kenyatta who said it, I'm not sure, that if you educate a man, you educate an individual. But to educate a woman means to educate a nation. And so I think that Africa historically has had a matrifocal worldview, and in many cases, a matrilineal line of descent with the emphasis on the female. The line of descent is on the female. In ancient Egypt, the great African nation par excellence, the worst crime you can commit, the greatest, the most terrible mistake you could make was to disrespect your mother. I find that very profound. If you go and look at the history of Kemet, it lasted for thousands of years. And I would say that the thing that kept it together the most was the family structure. And the female was at the center of that. And so the idea of patriarchy in Africa comes from the invasion and subjugation of Africa by outsiders, by Asia, and particularly by Europe. Africa still today, I would say, has in large measure a European worldview. And it's come to the norms that come from that now dominate much of Africa. And so no wonder we're messed up.
Yes, indeed. The presentation is called Black Women in History and Art. It will run on August 28th from 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and August 29th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a two-part presentation that will be conducted by our guest, Dr. Runoko Rashidi. He is our special guest on Open Door Cleveland. We will be right back with more on 95.9 FM WOVU, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station. We'll be right back.
I count, you count, your grandparents count, newborns count, and everyone you've seen today counts. If you've lived in the country only a few weeks or for your entire life, you count. If you live alone, with family, with friends, or with people you don't know all that well, you all count. Everyone in Cleveland counts. And everyone living in your household on April 1st needs to get counted as part of the 2020 census. An accurate count informs how billions of dollars in federal funding gets distributed annually for health clinics, after-school activities, road repairs, and hundreds of other programs. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
This is Aja Jones,
Tracy Clark,
Kiko,
Yolanda Armstrong,
Brian Webster.
This is TC Lewis, and you are listening to WOVU 95.9 FM.
We're back with Dr. Runoko Rashidi, the renowned cultural anthropologist and historian. He's been traveling the world documenting the existence of African people all over the globe, and we are honored to have him on Open Door Cleveland. We're talking about a presentation that he'll be doing on Zoom. It will happen on August 28th and 29th, and I will post the information to my Facebook page. And Dr. Rashidi, how can people reach you if they need to reach you and they want to connect about this very important presentation?
Yeah, first of all, Vince, thank you for having me. I appreciate you. And I'm grateful to be able to share some of my work and background and to promote this event. People can always reach me via the internet at runoko@hotmail.com. My name is spelled Runoko. Runoko. It's very easy. Runoko@hotmail.com. Or you can call me after the show at area code 323-803-8663. That's 323-803-8663. And I'd be happy to share with you the details of the event and how you can register. So please be in touch.
Okay. So we're talking about Africa right now, and I'm thinking about Madam Dr. Arikana Chiambore Kwao. I've seen quite a bit of her lately, and I just admire so much her passion and her connection, bringing Africans and Africans from the diaspora together. It seems as though there has been some movement in terms of both sides of the globe coming together. And, last year was really a pivotal year for myself, having gone to Africa twice, once with you and spending 3 weeks in Egypt and Sudan, and also spending 3 weeks in Ghana. And I've just noticed this idea that we gained so much traction in bringing Africans and Africans from the diaspora together in 1 year. Over 1 million went to Africa, over $1 billion in economic benefit to that continent. And then within a matter of months, all that momentum was gone. Have you noticed the same?
Yeah, it's ironic, and it's very sad. It's very unfortunate. If I believed in conspiracies, I could point to that. So one thing we can do, we can learn from it, and we can see what we're capable of. And hopefully, once we are able to get this virus behind us, or at least put it in a position where it's manageable and we can function, we can start up again. Mm-hmm. But I think, as you say, last year was a very, very important year. And sometimes the struggle is like one step forward and a half a step back. And it's not, and progress is oftentimes uneven. But just like history, it shows our potential. It shows what we are capable of doing, and we can do it again. I'm confident of that.
Yes. Well, the Organization for African Unity and other efforts that were meant to unite the countries of Africa to represent as one voice, they kind of went by the wayside. And then last year, African leaders agreed to destroy some of the barriers of trade between each other. And so as opposed to shipping goods to Europe and then having those goods go from Africa to Europe and back to Africa again, they said, well, why don't we just trade between each other and dismember or dismantle some of these borders between us? And then this happened. And it just seems kind of intentional that would happen. And then the other piece of it is the financial support that African countries are still providing to countries like France. Do you see any change in this colonialist or neo-colonial relationship that Africa has had with Europe?
Yeah, but again, I think it's very uneven. And I think that we would be very, very depressed if we thought it would be considered, even in the United States, not to change the subject. But I have been very encouraged by seeing all these young people taking to the streets, engaged in organized protest and what have you. But white supremacy is no joke, and it's not going to collapse easily. It really has to be attacked relentlessly. And so I would say the same thing in the motherland, that I see a lot of positive things, but there's also a lot of resistance to what we're trying to do. And it's just the way it is. And I think we have to condition ourselves for that. In other words, I'm not saying that we have the luxury of being complacent, but I think that we have to realize that the struggle that we're involved in didn't start yesterday and it's not going to end tomorrow. There are generations of struggle ahead of us. And one of the encouraging things that I see, just like I see here in Babylon in the USA, the majority of people in Africa are young people. And I would say that the future belongs to them. Now, I not only was able to spend time in the motherland last year, I did, of course, the tour that you were on in Kemet in Sudan, Egypt and Sudan. And I also took a group last year to Ghana, your country that I know you love, and also Togo and Benin. So I did 2 big trips to Africa last year. But at the beginning of this year, I took another group to Guinea-Bissau, to the Gambia and to Senegal, and I met so many impressive young people in Senegal. I mean, teenagers that really, really impressed me. So it tells me that the winds of change are on our side, and that one of the scholars that I've met over the years, I met years ago on another trip to Africa, a man named Joseph Kizerbo, says something that I really like and really resonates with me. He said, history is not finished. We need to understand that we have yet to write the last chapter. In fact, there will never be a last chapter. But history is not finished and the past is not dead. And we are in a dynamic situation. And one of the things that gives me some hope is when I see these young people, it makes me feel like my generation, God willing, I'll be 66 years old in a week and a half, that my generation didn't just spin their wheels, that we had an impact, that we had an influence, that we planted seeds. And now I think that I see a lot of those seeds sprouting, and it's very encouraging to me.
Are you familiar with the recording artist Akon? He's a Senegalese young brother. And have you seen what he's done in terms of developing infrastructure for energy purposes and other things?
I've been hearing about it for years.
Okay.
I think it's a good role model.
Okay. That is one thing that gives me hope, because, you know, it points out the fact that they are capable of doing things. But, you know, one of the major issues that I'm seeing right now is the lack of African developers.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, from your perspective, what can we do to create, enhance, or encourage Africans and African Americans to get involved in the development of Africa?
Well, for me, I think it's the most important thing is to continue to be an ambassador for Africa, to project Africa in a positive light, to encourage people to think in terms of Africa and not just the African American experience. I think I kind of echoed the words of Mary McLeod Bethune when she said, the drums of Africa still beat in my heart. And I think that we have to just tap into that. Now, I'm going to ask you a question in a moment, but I know that a couple, 3 years ago when this film Black Panther came out, it seemed to resonate in the African American community, that people took a newfound sense of pride in Wakanda, in Africa. People were asking me, Runoko, are you ever going to do a tour of Wakanda? And these are not, you know, the so-called woke community, not the African American intellectuals who are so deep and profound, but these are just regular black folk. Now, the question I want to ask you, because I haven't seen it, what do you think of this new video by Beyonce that so many people are talking about?
I haven't seen it. I've heard a lot about it, and my curiosity.
But it's resonated.
Yes.
Good and bad.
Right.
And so my point is, there are these African currents are things that cause us to begin to look at Africa in a different light. And it can be very exciting and motivating and inspirational. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to push Africa in a positive light and then let people run with it.
Mm-hmm. So did you see the film?
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I'm old. I haven't seen it, man.
Okay. Have you heard about the new the Black Panther film?
No, I have not.
Okay. Because it was shot in Cleveland. Much of it was shot in Cleveland.
Really?
And it's supposed to be out for theatrical release next year. I'm kind of hoping that I'll be able to catch a glimpse of it before it comes out, because I know some folks locally who worked on the film. And I think there's some kind of discussion about Fred Hampton in the film being depicted as a white, or being depicted as a black man, but the actor was actually a white man.
That's terrible.
Yeah, so
I wonder if they did a sequel, would it be watered down or fired up or what? You know, there's that African proverb that goes, until the lion has his historian, the hunter will always be a hero. Mm-hmm. And so I'm all for black people telling our story from our perspective without whispering or stuttering or stammering. And ultimately, we can be the only ones that can effectively tell our story. So I don't know. No, I have not seen the film. Haven't heard anything about it.
Okay. Well, Ryan Coogler is connected with the film. I think he's a producer of the film. So, and he was involved, if I'm correct about this, I think he was involved in the Black Panther film as well. So it should be an interesting view. And if nothing else, if you don't understand how important it is to be a revolutionary in the midst of a revolution, then you are kind of missing the boat. So looking forward to that. You have just recently published a book. Do you want to tell us about that book?
Well, the book isn't that recent. I've written or edited, I think, 21, 22 books now. And because of the pandemic, I've got ideas for about 3 or 4 more. For example, I want to do a very basic book called Teaching Moments that will look at aspects of our history and culture around the world. And I want to do another book on the image of the African in European art, just, photographs for the most part. And that will be kind of, it will come after my most recent book, which is called Black and Beautiful in the Ancient World, or Beautiful World and Divine, the Black Presence in the Ancient World. And it's gotten rave reviews. I have 200 of my best photographs from the museums of the world on high quality paper, full color photographs that range from ancient Africa to the Black presence in various parts of the world. That's my newest book. It's published by Books of Africa in London, and I love it. At this stage of my life in particular, I'm determined to be associated with things of quality. I want my stuff to look good, and I want to be associated with that. And so I really try to carefully pick out the projects that I'm going to engage in. And this book, I think, as I say, it's gotten very, very good reviews, and I'm very pleased with it. You can go to my website, by the way, if you're interested, which is drrunoko.com, DRRUNOKO, drrunoko.com. You can see my that book, my more recent books. I have a book for children. I have another photo book. I have a scroll called Women of Power and Queens of the Nile, a vinyl scroll where you can see the images. I have a scroll with the Olmec heads. So I have found many ways to showcase my work, to showcase my art, and also encourage people to purchase these things so I'm in a position to do even more than I'm attempting to do.
Okay. The presentation is called Black Women in History and Art. It airs on August 28th from 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern, and on August 29th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. And it will have Dr. Runoko Rashidi presenting some of his best work to a viewing audience around the world. I think our brother Kofi Kefera will probably be viewing from from Singapore if he can. And I don't know if you know, but he has a new book out as well.
Yeah, he does have a new book out. He tells me he's going to send me a copy. In fact, he may just be flattering me, but he said he couldn't have done it without me. Okay. So, well, Kofi is a relatively young brother, and we're glad to see him grow. As we get older, at least as I get older, I don't feel any sense of jealousy or envy. I think a good teacher, and I do believe I'm a good teacher, is measured by the students that they produce. And a good teacher wants their students to go beyond them because that's a sign of their own effectiveness. And you and I have had teachers, the generation that came before us, Dr. Ben, Asa Hilliard, Ivan Van Sertima, John Henry Clark, there's so many others. And now it's our turn. We're the elders now. Yes. And it's good to see brothers like Kofi and so many others who are picking up the baton and moving forward. In fact, we have to make a comment about the recent transition of Dr. Patricia Hilliard Nunn. She is one of the daughters of the great scholar Asa Hilliard. And she was also a young scholar, I believe, at Florida State University, who passed just a few days ago. And so a shout out to her spirit. May she fly on the wings of Ma'at, because we lose too many of our people far too early.
Absolutely. We're talking with Dr. Runoko Rashidi right here on Open Door Cleveland with Vince Robinson. We'll be right back right here on 95.9 FM WOVU.
What can you do in the battle against COVID-19? Your first task, wear a mask, protect yourself and others. Armor up, armor up. Give those hands a 20-second shower with soap and water. Armor up, armor up. Give others space 6 feet just in case. Armor up, armor up. Get good nutrition, ingest for digestion. Armor up, armor up. Vitamin C, D3, and more. Armor up, armor up. Elderberries, zinc, and echinacea from the store. Armor up, armor up. Get some fresh air. Go climb some stairs. Armor up, armor up. Let go of stress. Make sure you rest. Armor up, armor up. Your breath is the key to life. Strengthen your immune system, follow the guidelines, and win the battle against COVID-19. Armor up, armor up.
My name is Robert Johnson Jr.
This is Corey Jenkins.
And Courtney Jenkins.
This is Artemis Carter.
Hi, this is Anita Isom.
This is Delvis Valentine.
This is Susan Lacotte.
Eric Nolan is in the building.
I am Talitha Kubabe, and you're listening to 95.9 FM WOVU.
We're back on Open Door Cleveland with Vince Robinson. Our guest is Dr. Runoko Rashidi, who will be presenting Black Women in History and Art on August 28th and 29th. You can go to my Facebook page for details on that, and you can also reach out to Dr. Rashidi, and we will give his information before the show concludes. Want to shift gears and come back to America. We spent some time in Africa in the first half of the show, but I am just curious about your reflections on the current state of politics and economics. We're seeing protests across the country, and a lot of these protests were ignited by the murder of George Floyd. People around the world have responded, and it has caused an uproar in various places on the globe. What are your feelings about this space of difficulty that we're going through right now?
I think it's very encouraging. And if not for the pandemic, or maybe it's related to the pandemic, we'd be seeing a lot more of it. Now, a few weeks ago, obviously, it dominated the news every day. But I think that the news media now is focused, and perhaps it should be, on this pandemic, perhaps because so many people were forced to shelter in place, and maybe because the pandemic showed the inequities in terms of the healthcare system, like everything else, that it all kind of exploded. And the killing of George Floyd is not new, but seeing it like that videotaped for over 8 minutes, such a horrific fashion in broad daylight, it really galvanized a lot of people. So I was really, really, really encouraged. You know, you always want to think that instead of just reacting to a horrific event, which happens all the time, that it will spark a movement, that it will galvanize people. And that's what it did. And not just in the United States, but all over the world. I received emails from sisters and seen demonstrations really all over the world, and not just Black people. But it's particularly encouraging for me to have seen or received emails and inquiries from sisters and brothers in Australia, in Melanesia, in India, parts of the world that a lot of people don't look at from an African perspective, particularly the Dalits, the Black untouchables of India. And so it's been very, very encouraging to me. And all I could tell these young people is, and not just young people, but keep on going. And if there's anything that I can do, you know, call on me. My marching days are done. But I definitely appreciate and salute those sisters and brothers who are out there on the front line trying to bring about change. Every generation has this opportunity to make a statement, to create its own leaders, to tell its story. And I'm encouraged by what I see. Even my daughter, all of 15 years old, has been participating in the demonstrations in Paris, France. And I love her for that.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, we witnessed what happened with Rodney King in Los Angeles years ago, and there was a response that was local to Los Angeles, and then there were probably reactions to it in other parts of the country. What do you think is different about the George Floyd murder as opposed to the Rodney King situation?
Sometimes I think it's just a matter of timing. You know, I've often wondered what you do to bring about social change. For example, we could look back relatively recently and see what's called the Harlem Renaissance, and we must talk about Marcus Garvey. And we can see the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement and the African consciousness movement in South Africa. And I've wondered if it's just cyclical, or if there are forces that coalesce at a given time that you don't have a lot of control over and you just respond to. And so I can't help but think that a lot of what has happened in terms of the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd is just, like a perfect storm of things. The advanced technology so that you could capture something like that on video or on a cell phone. And we didn't have that technology 20, 30 years ago. The advancement in the media, people being able to contact information and pass information along. I think it's just a number of factors, and I'm encouraged by it. I think it's a very, very good thing.
Something else that we've seen is we've seen an acknowledgement of the injustice come from multinational corporations and companies here, nonprofit organizations who have committed to some type of change. But I just kind of wonder sometimes if this is a system that can be repaired, or is it a system that needs to be completely reconstructed? What are your thoughts?
Maybe combinations of both. Like working inside the system while at the same time trying to create another system, a better system. I think maybe it's the story of we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think that we see elements of both, and they are not necessarily incompatible with each other. Mm-hmm. That maybe that's idealistic, maybe that's too philosophical, but I think that's the way it is right now. Right now, I'm really pondering certain things, maybe because I've been in one place for such a long time, months for me, that it gives me an opportunity to reflect and think about things that I haven't really thought about before. And one of the key things is how we build unity in our community. If there's one thing we agree on, and we may not agree on too much as a people, most of us would agree, I think, that Black people need to unite. We need to come together. I think that's pretty much a given. But on whose terms? Who sets the terms for Black unity? For example, I spend a lot of time on social media, as you know, and I've evolved in many ways. And one thing that I don't do anymore is, or at least I don't do very often, is I don't put posts on my Facebook pages where people are attacking other people's religions or even other people's sexual preferences, because I want to be able to see the bigger picture. How do you build unity in a community if you're attacking the other person's religion, even if you think you are right? How do you build unity in a community if you are attacking other people's, I don't know, brother, values or lifestyles? Maybe this is a sensitive subject, but I'll say it. I don't understand homosexuality. I don't understand it. But to me, if you are gay and you want to make a contribution to the struggle and you are Black, I say bring it on. That I am not in a position to impose my set of values on your sexual preference if I'm trying to build broader unity in the community. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Muslim. But I know many people in our community who are. And so I'm not in a position to attack your religion and then at the same time say Black people need to unite. And those are the things I've been trying to figure. We need unity, but on whose terms? On what are we prepared to unite upon? Am I making sense at all?
Absolutely. And one thing that I what resonates with me after having been to Africa, it was seeing how people from different religions got along. I mean, when you're in the village and you hear the prayers at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then you hear church at 11 o'clock in the afternoon or in the morning, and you see all these folks who have different religions, but they still have a certain sense of community. But then you come here and then you have all these divisions within the Christian church, and then you have different factions of Islam. And so when people can't agree on what they can work towards or work for, then you don't see any progress. Mm. So, yeah. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. And two, what we're seeing now is kind of a growing awareness of the importance of Black economic power. You know, you have folks having conversations about boycotting, for instance. Last month they were saying that, you know, you want to boycott on this day. They had a whole week that you weren't supposed to buy from this store or that store. But behind that, you also have that realization that only 3% of our money stays in our community.
I'm surprised it's as much as 3%.
Yeah, well, 3% of $1.6 trillion is a lot.
It's a lot of money.
But just think if it was 50% or if it was just 20%, you know, that some other groups maintain in their respective communities. What do you think it's going to take for folks to wake up to the power that they have?
Brother, you're asking so many profound questions, and I wish I had an easy answer for that. You know, I do not. You know, I think that any intelligent Black person should understand our economic potential and the power of not just boycotting, but also selective spending. It seems to me that what we really lack more than anything else is a clear vision and a sense of organization or cohesion. And so for me, all I can really do is keep trying to stimulate consciousness, you know, and try to give our people a positive view of themselves by looking at the great things that we've done historically.
Yeah.
And then I think people have to make conscious decisions. And maybe it's up for other people, younger people perhaps, to engage in that sense of organization. Now, you mentioned early on, I've done more than one interview today, and they tend to get a little blurred. But I think you were talking about Black women in the political sphere right now.
Yes.
Now, I'm really encouraged by this sister, particularly the sister in Atlanta, Lakeisha Bottoms. And so, as I say, perhaps each generation and each crisis throws new leadership to the fore, and people are able to show their mettle and to make their statement in the world. So maybe there are just certain things that are out of our control. I don't know. I'm not trying to cop out. But as I get older, I realize that I don't have the answers for everything, you know, and perhaps the most important thing is not even having the answers, but knowing the right questions to begin to ask.
Yes. Well, I think you spoke about the importance of history because we can look to the past to understand the future. And in that history is your life, there's so much that we can learn by going back. And I think one of the biggest deficits is our knowledge of what happened in the past. But I think it's also important to understand that white folks don't know history either, because the version that they've gotten has been tainted so much that they don't know who they are, nor do they know who we are.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's change this up a little bit. What is your view of all these non-Africans in these demonstrations? That's one of the most interesting things about it. It's not just a Black thing, but you find people of all ethnic groups participating. What is your view towards that?
I think part of it is to create a distraction to take away from the real message, because you've got extremes showing up. And I witnessed it here in Cleveland with a protest that took place on May 31st this year. It was obvious to me that there were disruptive forces in the midst of what was supposed to be a peaceful protest.
Well, I'm talking about beyond the disruptive forces, though.
Well, I think we have to take advantage of the allies that we have if they are, you know, supportive of our struggle. You know, this gives them an opportunity to participate in the repair that needs to take place. You know, we've talked about this idea of reparations, and I want to talk about that a little bit further, but we're coming up against a break. So we're going to come right back, and then we're going to talk about reparations, because there's some very significant activity that's taking place right now that needs to be discussed. You're listening to Open Door Cleveland with Vince Robinson. Our special guest is Dr. Runoko Rashidi, the cultural anthropologist, historian, and overall great person. We'll be right back after this.
Crazy T, what are you doing?
What you mean?
Why are you about to throw that out the window?
I'm saying I'm done with it. I didn't want to junk your car up. I was looking out for you.
No, I'm sure we'll make a stop. You could throw it out a trash can or something. In fact, wait, I got a little bag I usually keep, right here.
I'm saying, is it that big a deal? The window's right here.
Of course. This is our community. We live here. This is our community.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
Why would you want to junk up our own community?
Yeah, I didn't know you was going to get all, whatever, civil rights on it or whatever. You're right. You're right. My bad. I didn't know.
You should be in the uproar yourself, too, when you see people do it.
You know what? I'm going to do better, because, this is my community. I got to live here. You're right.
We all need to do better. Don't litter.
Littering is a serious offense, punishable by fines up to $500 and or 60 days in jail.
Don't litter. This is your community. Brought to you by WOVU 95.9 BBC Community Radio. Our voices united.
We're back with Dr. Runoko Rashidi right here on Open Door Cleveland. He will be presenting Black Women in History and Art on August 28th from 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern, and from August 29th, 11:30 to 1 p.m. Eastern. And Dr. Rashidi, if they want to see that presentation, how can they view it?
Just email me, and I'll send you the flyer. I'll send you the link in terms of how you can register, give you the prices. It's very nominally priced. My email address is runoko@hotmail.com, RUNOKO.
Okay.
My head is really spinning.
Okay. All right.
Runoko@hotmail.com, or please call me at area code 323-803-8663. You brought up the subject of reparations.
Yes.
Let me say one other thing before we deal with that. I think another reason for the demonstrations is reaction to Donald Trump. I think that a lot of people are angry, especially young people, are angry about this administration in Babylon. So I think some of it is a reaction to that. In terms of reparations, I'm all for it, always been for it, but there's one question that I never have had answered to my satisfaction is, how do you make them pay up? You can identify the form reparations should take. You can identify who owes us reparations. But how do you make them pay? It will not be done, I'm convinced, on the basis of morality. Because if that was the case, we'd have got it a long time ago. And we don't have an army. We don't have a way to enforce it. And so the question about reparations has never been met to my satisfaction. How do we make them pay up? So for me, ultimately, knowledge of self is about the accumulation of power, Black power, so that we can be safe, we can live in peace, and we can enforce our demands. How do we get the artifacts in the museums returned to Africa? How do we get respect in our community? It's about the accumulation of power. Frederick Douglass said it, power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will. And that, to me, seems to be where we have to ultimately focus, on getting organized and attaining power in our community so we can have the mechanism to bring about the changes that are so important for our future as a people.
Okay. Well, I had an epiphany about reparations a few months ago, and it was kind of precipitated by this pandemic. And it was just interesting to me that we had this so-called crisis in our country, and all of a sudden, over $2 trillion magically appears.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it's that easy, then why can't you do that for folks who deserve it? Because there is definitely
the value of Black life is not deemed important.
Yes. So
that's what it boils down to.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I don't think that there's any really serious conversation about it. Conyers had a bill that was tabled for years. They wouldn't even talk about it. It wasn't even, can we do it? They didn't even want to talk about it. And then Marianne Williamson brought it up as she was campaigning for president. And then all of a sudden it became a vogue subject. So people are talking about it, but they still weren't serious about it. Then we have the pandemic, and then the money just drops out of heaven. But it still goes to corporations, and very little of it reaches the American people. So to me, it just doesn't seem that they're really serious about addressing the needs of the people who are in this country.
Not at all.
Yes. So, but I think we are gaining ground. There was a woman who just got elected to Congress, and she replaced I'm just going to call him a handkerchief head. I'm not going to call his name. But she replaced him, and there's a lot of hope because
you mean the sister Cori Bush, I think is her name.
Yes,
yeah.
That's who I was speaking. I was trying to be nice about it, but folks will do their homework and they'll figure out who the opponent was. But we've seen that, and we're seeing a lot of grassroots folk get into the political process. And I kind of see the same thing happening on the other side of the world as the politicians kind of give up the stronghold that they've had on those positions for so long. I think that's really the hope for us. Do you think it's possible for Black people to have their own?
What do you mean? Please clarify that.
Well, have your own land, have your own government, have your own separate entity in the vein of the Nation of Islam and other groups that advocate self-determination.
Not in the United States.
Okay.
I think Africa is the key. And one of the things that I think we are bound together about is the need for Africans in America to connect with Africans on the continent. And I think that there have always been historical efforts to prevent that. Imagine what we could do if we were united here in Babylon. That would be great. But imagine what we could do if the Africans in the Western Hemisphere in different parts of the world united with the continent. And that brings us to, I know we're running out of time, we have to acknowledge Marcus Garvey. Mm-hmm. His birthday is coming up. There are a lot of activities around Garvey, and I'm a Garveyite and a Pan-Africanist. And Garvey personified that. He said, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. This is over 100 years ago. Garvey said he founded this organization, the UNIA and ACL, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. And he was asked why he did. He said, I looked around for the black man's army, his navy, his men of big affairs, and could not find them. And so I decided to help create them. Has anything really fundamentally changed? Who protects our people? Who speaks? Even tell me one leader in the world that speaks for African people. I'm not talking about this tribe or this micronation, but for African people in general. So one of the things I think is encouraging is when I see these young people and we're fostering these ideas and planting these seeds, I think that they will provide answers for that. But I really pay big salutes, black salutes to Marcus Garvey and what he stood for. And I don't believe that Marcus Garvey is dead. I believe the dead live in us. And as long as their ideas are alive, then they are alive as well. So long live Marcus Garvey, long live African people.
Absolutely. You're making a reference to a historical figure, and I'm just thinking about the paradigm shift that we're seeing in education right now. I think a lot more people will be schooling their children at home.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what kind of vision that you might have in terms of how education can be transformed to give more of an accurate historical perspective.
There was a man that I admired a great deal, a historian who had a big influence on me, and his name was John G. Jackson, great scholar. And I was talking to him one day, and I asked him about his great teacher, a brother named Willis Nathaniel Huggins. And I said, I asked him the same question, and I asked him what Huggins would say, and he said, tell him the truth. And I think that that's what we have to do. Tell him the truth. That's unvarnished. Don't lie about it. Give it to them straight and give them the whole story. And I think that they will figure it out. The African proverb goes, if you know the beginning well, the ending will not trouble you. So let us tell our story from our perspective without whispering, stuttering, or stammering. And let that light reveal itself to the world. And I think that that will provide a true path for where we need to go. And I think our children are going to lead us on that path. But we have to arm the adults so that they can teach the children. So that's what my job is to, as a historian, to provide the historical ammunition that we can use to explode the chains of mental enslavement that shackle our minds.
So is your mission primarily to adults?
My mission is to reach everybody that can be reached. I don't spend time arguing with folk. I'm not going to debate. I'm going to try to reach those that are reachable. Frederick Douglass used to say, it's easier to build a child than repair a broken adult. but we need to develop a cadre of adults that are capable of reaching the children. And so it's twofold. On the one hand, we want to reach those adults that can be reached, that will be ambassadors for Africa, that will be teachers and tellers of our story. And then we want to try to plant those seeds in our children so that they can take it. This is not a one generational thing. This is a struggle for many generations. And I think that we have to prepare ourselves for that. Oftentimes, I believe we get frustrated when we don't see immediate results, but it doesn't work that way. We do our best, and then we see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Are you having conversations with some of your colleagues who are leaders within the realm of Pan-African thought about how they can impact or how you can impact American education when it comes to African history and African-American history?
People ask me all the time about curricula, about drafting programs for students. I participate in a lot of programs for students. Of course, this pandemic has changed a lot of things. But I think that is a work in progress. And there are a lot of people who are doing exactly that. So I think that we need to be encouraged. It's easy to be frustrated, and it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to get tired. It's even okay to take a break, but you can't quit. You can step aside for a moment. You can rejuvenate. You can catch your breath, but you can't stop. History will judge us harshly if we don't continue to do what we've been doing, but do it even better.
I also have to ask you, based on what you're seeing about how education is going to be transformed and, this hybrid model of part online, part at the school, what impact do you think it's going to have on young minds?
I'm not sure what you mean. Please restate your question.
Well, the idea of going to school and sitting with a barrier between you and a classmate, or sitting in the classroom with a mask on, or, just the changes that have taken place, not having proms and all of the other trauma that students have been through. I'm just wondering, how students are going to be affected by this so-called new normal and how you perceive that.
I don't know, brother. Only time will tell. We have a history of resilience and meeting challenges. That has been our history for the last several hundred years. And I have no doubt that we'll find ingenious methods of dealing with the current crises that we confront.
Okay. For the benefit of those who weren't able to join us at the beginning of the program, I just wanted to give you another opportunity to describe the program that you're going to be doing on Zoom on the 28th and the 29th of August. It's called Black Women in History and Art. And just give us a glimpse of who you'll be talking about and what we'll be seeing.
It'll be a visual overview, original photographs, spectacular Black women in history and art. The images will come from the museums in large measure, but also tombs, temples, monuments, etc. It'll be a Black man's tribute to Black women. It'll be historical. It's going to be special. There'll be an evening session where we look largely at ancient Africa, and then the next morning we'll take it back from ancient times into modern times. So it's going to be visual. Each session will last 90 minutes, 150 photographs, and there'll be time at the end of every session for questions and answers. And so we're kind of taking advantage of this Zoom technology. It's something new, but it's also something exciting, and it has great potential and opportunity to share, perhaps in a way that we've never been able to have before.
Well, we are going to wish you great success with that endeavor. I'll have to tune in and check that out and encourage others to do the same. Once more, if people want to reach you, how can they get to you?
Runoko@hotmail.com is my email address. RUNOKO, Runoko@hotmail.com. You can call me at area code 323-803-8663. That's 323-803-8663. I'll go to the website, which is drdrrunoko.com. Brother Vincent, I want to thank you for having me on your show. You've been consistent for a long time. I appreciate the relationship, and I'm grateful to you for allowing me to share and promote this program and just share a few words for the community. Thank you for that.
Thank you, and I appreciate you reaching out to me. I'm glad to assist whenever I can. You've been listening to Open Door Cleveland with Vince Robinson and our special guest, Dr. Runoko Rashidi. Don't forget, you can also check out the podcast for Open Door Cleveland on my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, put in Vince Robinson, Open Door Cleveland, and it will bring up this broadcast so you can listen to it at your leisure. Until then, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make it a great day, Cleveland. Peace.